I woke up not being able to hear out of my left ear, so if I'm like yelling, I apologize. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you're new here. Hi, my name is Liz and today we're going to be doing my October wrap up. This month had some highs and lows. I feel like I started the month off feeling really good about reading. I was doing different reading vlogs and I was just really enjoying my time while reading these books. I feel like I was just like flying through anything I could get my hands on, even if it wasn't like a super high rating. I feel like I ended the month off kind of slowly trickling off of that. I was in one of my close friends' weddings towards the end of this month. There was just some other things going on that I feel like I just didn't have time to read. I still read a decent amount of books this month. However, I do feel like towards the end, I was slowly starting to fall kind of into like a book slump. I'm trying to get out of it at the moment. Bear with me. I still really enjoyed a lot of the books that I read this month. The types of books I was able to read, it definitely gave me the fall vibes, and that's really all I could ask for in the month of October. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So the first 3 books that I'm going to be talking about, these are all books that were in the reading vlog that I did earlier this month, which was reading thrillers for a week. So I'm not going to go like super detailed into my ratings with those. I will give a quick summary of what the books are about and tell you what my rating was and maybe 1 or 2 sentences about what I thought, just kind of generalizing it. But if you're interested in a more in-depth look at each of those books, definitely go check out that video. The first book we have is You Shouldn't Have Come Here by Geneva Rose. This is the author of The Perfect Marriage, which has gotten a lot of hype over the years. After reading this book, I definitely want to read that book at some point. This book, it's dual point of view, but it follows our main character. She is going to an Airbnb out in Wyoming. Every year she goes on a trip by herself, and this year she chose Wyoming. And when she gets there, there's a man who's living on the property. He owns the property, and so you also get his point of views. You get chapters from him as well. Right off the bat, there's just lots of weird things happening. There's a woman missing in town. It's just suspenseful. I'm gonna leave it at that, and it will leave you not knowing who to trust. It was a very fun read. I ended up giving this 3.5 stars. It was very fast paced, very easy writing. Chapters were very short and quick, and I really liked how each chapter kind of ended in a way that was kind of eerie and suspenseful and kept me guessing. It made me rethink what I thought I knew. In that same reading vlog, I read Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Jillian McAllister. This story follows our main character, who is a mom, and one evening her son is walking home. She sees him walking along the street trying to get back for curfew. Then there's this man who shows up and her son stabs this man. It leaves our main character just shocked. She has no clue what happened or why her son did this, and she goes to bed that night. The next day she wakes up and it's yesterday. So this book is a really fun twist on time travel. Each day she wakes up, it's the day prior to the day before, so it does tell you at the beginning of each chapter what day we're on, like minus this many days. Each time she wakes up a new day, it seems like she's slowly piecing together. She gets like little clues or hints of what went wrong with her son. I really enjoyed this one. I ended up rating it 4 stars. This was a really cool take on time travel and the love a mother has for her son and how she proves that time and time again. It also just kind of wrapped up in a way that was very satisfying, so highly recommend this one. And the last book that I read in that reading vlog was That's Not My Name by Megan Lally. The reason why I wanted to read this was because a lot of people were saying that if you're fans of Vincent Ralph or Natalie D. Richards, then you would love this author, and I have to say that's 100% correct. The writing style is basically the same. It's so fast-paced. Each chapter is like a few pages long. Our main character, she wakes up on the side of the road with no memory. She's very badly beaten and bruised. Cop picks her up and takes her to the station. While she's there, they're trying to figure out who she is, where she came from. This man shows up, says he's her father, and he has proof, while you also have an alternate timeline of a boy who is the prime suspect in his missing girlfriend's case. He's trying to figure out what happened to his girlfriend and prove his innocence. It was very fast-paced, very intriguing. I really love when the main character has no memories. I don't know why. I think it just adds this whole nother layer of suspense because you don't know who to trust like the entire time. Next, we had a reread, and that was Assistant to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Mayer. I reread this because I loved it last year, and I also really wanted to read Apprentice to the Villain, and so I went ahead and read that after I read this one. The story is just so good. It's so fun. It's basically a Disney movie in a fantasy world. Our main character is an assistant to the villain, and you are getting her chapters, and you're also getting a few chapters from the villain's perspective, which I loved. It's the type of writing style, relationships, and like like banter that just leaves you like giggling and like kicking your feet watching these two interact with each other. Both were very entertaining, very fun. Basically, it's Despicable Me if Gru was hot and the minions were a young woman. That's all I'm gonna say because I feel like you don't need much more than that. I ended up giving Assistant to the Villain 4 stars and Apprentice to the Villain also 4 stars. Both great, very fun. There's gonna be a third book and I cannot wait. Next up, we have a surprise read. The reason why it's a surprise is because I actually started listening to this on audiobook. As soon as I listened to a couple of chapters, I immediately wanted to buy the physical book and read the physical book because it was really good. It was really capturing my attention and I was really enjoying it. And that is The Dagger and the Flame by Catherine Doyle. I don't think I've ever read anything by this author. It is a young adult fantasy and it was so good. This one I feel like had enough differences that I was really just engaged in the world building and what was happening with our characters. In this fantasy world, there's this thing called shade, and it's basically this like powdery substance that gives you magical capabilities. And in this world, there's two different orders. There's the Order of the Daggers and the Order of the Cloaks. The daggers are kind of what they sound like. They're basically assassins, and the cloaks are thieves. Our main character, her mother gets murdered. She's on the run and someone is trying to kill her. And so she ends up joining the Order of the Cloaks to gain safety from this dagger who's trying to kill her. I'm just gonna kind of leave it at that because I feel like this is the kind of world that I feel like you don't need much more than that. It's very simple world building. It's not very confusing. I honestly flew through this book and I really, really enjoyed it. I ended up giving this 4 stars and it is gonna be a series, so I'm really looking forward to the next one. And it is Enemies to Lovers, so based on the cover, I'm sure you could have guessed that. Next up, we have Still Beating by Jennifer Hartman. I have a lot and also not a lot of things to say about this book. I'll just first tell you the premise. So basically our main character, she ends up getting kidnapped by a serial killer along with her sister's fiance. Our main character and the sister's fiance hate each other. They've always hated each other and they've had the worst relationship growing up. They both get kidnapped one night by a serial killer and are locked in his basement. They're kind of forced to do things that, I mean, you can probably guess what they're forced to do. It's a very disturbing but also very beautiful story about healing from such a traumatic event and trying to find the good and also finding healing through others. I don't want to say much more than that because I don't want to give things away. I flew through this book. I think if you get triggered very easily, you definitely should not read this book because it definitely goes into detail about certain things. Definitely look at trigger warnings before reading this book, but I will say I flew through this. The story had me from the first page. I'm not going to give it a rating just because it feels weird rating something that's based on very traumatic things. Next, I don't have this book currently, but I will put up a picture of it somewhere on the screen, and that is The Enemy by Sarah Adams. I actually listened to this as an audiobook instead of reading it physically. All I have to say, I learned some things about myself this month, and that is if I'm listening to an audiobook, it should not be a romance. I ended up rating this book 3 stars, which isn't a bad rating. It's not. I feel like I've rated all of Sarah Adams' books pretty similarly, where it's just kind of a myth. It's a very cheesy, silly romance. This book follows our main character, who is a baker, and her high school rival is in town, and he's actually this famous chef, very world-renowned chef, and it's just like their banter back and forth. You also get his chapters, and they both are basically in love with each other. You know this from the get-go. They're very attracted to each other. But it was very cheesy, very silly. What I've noticed about audiobooks is, at least the voice actor for this one, I think since it was such a cheesy romance, it felt even cheesier listening to it. It was a very short and quick read. I love that Sarah Adams is known for her closed-door romances. So if you're not a fan of heavy spice, she is the author for you when it comes to romance. It just didn't feel like there was much character depth. It didn't feel like there was a lot going on besides the romance in the story. And the next one I also listened to, so this is where it really solidified my opinion on audiobooks. I listened to Truly Madly Deeply by LJ Shen. I did not finish it. I DNF'd the audiobook because the voice actor sounded almost like a Valley Girl, but like to the extreme. I could not get past the voices. And I don't know if I would have enjoyed the book physically because the story just follows a guy and a girl. So it's a girl and her sister's older brother who have feelings for each other, and they end up hooking up right before they each go to college. And the best friend and the brother's sister finds out and kind of forces all of them apart. So it's like years later, they're reuniting and they're trying to like fix what went wrong in the past. The amount of spice and the language used in this book was a little much for me. I will admit that. I didn't finish it because of that reason and also the voices. I said this in my book X video months ago, but whenever a book says he growled, I hate that so much. I can kind of like ignore it if I'm reading it, but hearing it in audiobook form, that was quite the experience. Would not recommend. And the last book that I finished this month, and what a way to go out, was the Mind F series by St. Abby. This is a reread. I've been wanting to reread this book for a while now, and I'm so glad I finally did because I really, really enjoyed this story. I rated this 5 stars the first time I read it, and I still am rating it 5 stars now. I really love these characters in this world we're in. It's basically, just to generalize it, our main character is a serial killer, and she's falling in love with the FBI agent who's trying to capture her. I know that sounds like, Liz, what are you reading? But it really goes into the psyche behind her and why she's a serial killer. It goes into her history, her past, her trauma. It's truly beautiful whenever that all unravels. It slowly unravels throughout the story. I just really enjoy this. I know it's a thicker book, but this is technically a series. This is books 1 through 5 put into one physical book. And each of the 5 books ends in a cliffhanger. So it's so fast paced, so quick, and it really is just totally bingeable. I read this so quick because I just love this story. I love these characters. Look at trigger warnings because yes, it definitely talks about triggering subjects in the story and it does go into detail. So just be warned about that. There's some heavy books this month. And that is it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Hopefully this gave you some new book recommendations or just gave you some entertainment for a little while. I'm really hoping I can get out of this book slump like today. So we'll see. The month of November, it's not starting out on a good note. So we'll just leave it at that. Thank you guys so much for watching and I will see you guys in my next video. Happy reading. Bye.